Everything, remember, has a dharma. Every creature, every rose, and every human being has a dharma. You're already fulfilling it physically. You're already in the bodies that you were intended to be in. Remember what I said before, it is not about where you are, it's about what direction you're headed. And as long as you know you're heading in the direction of staying here in meaning. Now, this concept of a calling, I wrote a whole book about it. It's called Inspiration, in Spirit. And the subtitle is called Your Ultimate Calling. So I'm going to introduce a word here to help you to identify your calling. And that word is passion. And it doesn't make any difference to me whether that passion has anything to do with making a living, or it's a part of the DOT, the Dictionary of Occupational Titles. What is it that you find passion about? And the only condition I place on it is that it is in alignment with God or with your source. All right? So that your passion, if your passion is about killing other people, for example, if your passion is about stealing, if your passion is about, I often said that there's two ways to have the tallest building in town. One of the ways to have the tallest building in town, always, is to go around and knock down anybody else's building when they start getting taller than yours. So as soon as they get up, if you're at the 44 floors and they get to 43, 44, you just go over and you put some explosives in there and you just blow it up. And you say, I have the tallest building in town. And this is, by the way, our collective ego. This is what we do in our society and in our world, and which is about, if you really want to know my passion and my calling, it's about shifting the entire consciousness of this planet before I leave it. And that's why the film titled The Shift is so significant to me, because I know that if I can get 10 million people to watch that film, The Shift, if I can get 10 million people in America and Canada to watch that film, that we reach something called pi, 3.1416, remember? And if you can get 3.1416% of a population to align, the rest of it's called a critical mass in physics. You reach what is called phase transition. And if you align enough people or electrons or subatomic particles up and align them in a certain way in an energy field, and you reach what they call the 100th monkey, when you reach that point, all the rest of the electrons or the people in that energy field begin to align as well. And we have aligned ourselves collectively with a consciousness that allows for people to knock down other people's buildings. The other way to have the tallest building in town is to always work on your own building and not be concerned with anybody else's building or what anyone else out there is doing, or being consumed with trying to compete with or win or defend. To listen to your calling. So your calling is the thing within you that has your attention, that has your passionate attention. And it doesn't make any difference whether it makes sense to anybody else. It's the thing that you feel inside of you that you're here for. It's Mr. Holland in Mr. Holland's opus. And here's the secret, here's the thing that I learned. That it's the presence of the passion. That when you have the presence of the passion within you for what it is that you feel is your calling, everything else will take care of itself. That is an indication that you have God within you and guiding you. The word enthusiasm, and theos, iasm, translates to the God within in Greek. The God within. When you are enthusiastic about something, anything, when you have that kind of internal knowing that this is what I'm doing. And sometimes you have to, that Shakespeare's He wasn't just a great writer, he was an incredible philosopher. Probably the most famous lines from Shakespeare are from Hamlet. To be or not to be, that is the question. And that's a very profound question. But what follows that is much more profound. He said, after to be or not to be, that is the question. Whether 'tis nobler in the minds of men to suffer the slings and arrows of outrageous fortune, or to take arms against a sea of troubles, and thus by opposing end them. You have to ask the question, and that's what this program is about, and that's what the movie is about, and that's what the book is about, and that's what all of it is about. To be or not to be. Am I going to be who I came into this world to be, and there's something inside of me that has always been calling me to it? Or am I going to allow the slings and arrows of an outrageous fortune that has been imposed upon me by others to dictate my dharma? That's really the question. And it's a question that you can answer and respond to and live with.
In the teachings of Buddha, there was a quote that I really loved. I didn't put it as a display quote, but it's really very powerful. And that quote from Buddha is, the only effort of any intelligent person in this world ought to be to know something which cannot be destroyed by death. The only effort of any intelligent person in this world ought to be to know something, not to believe in something, to know something which cannot be destroyed by death. And I wonder if you know something. Know means trust. If you trust in something without any doubt that cannot be destroyed by death, certainly it's not your body or any of your possessions, all of which will become dust. Everything on the planet, including you, to put it in Ken Wilber's terms, is tomorrow's food. It's a constant recycling in the physical plane. So what part of you cannot be destroyed by death? What part of you is real, if you will, as Lao Tzu put it? But I knew there was something in the New Testament that really had struck me. So the first is from John 10, verse 34. It says, "Is it not written in your law, I have said, you are gods." From Jesus Christ. Is it not written in your law, I have said, you are gods? Which is really what you have to understand and embrace and know if you're going to become a manifester. You have to know what you are being told here by a great spiritual teacher. You are gods. And the second one was John 14, verse 20, that says, on that day you will know. See how that word know is always there. You won't believe. You will know. On that day you will know that I am in my Father, and you in me, and I in you. So what is being talked about here? What is being talked about is not something that is physical. It's not like my arm is in your arm, my spleen is in you. What we're talking about here is something that is beyond the physical, that is in you, and in the Father, and in me, and in everything. And if you get this, if you know this, then you begin to see yourself as connected to this divine intelligence that is everywhere, that is always flowing, that is inexhaustible, that is non-judgmental, that is available for you to plug into, just like electricity. And you can do anything you want with it, like electricity. It'll light up a hospital where everybody is reputed to be ill, and it'll light up a house of ill repute. You can do what you want with it. It is there. It is divine. And you are a piece of it. You are connected to it. And once you trust in this, and once you know this, you almost come to a different perspective in your life. Earlier in the first principle, I had talked about these archetypes that Carl Jung referred to. And in these archetypes, he said that we move from athletes to warriors to statesmen to spirit, and then when we are there, we can be all of these things. And one of the things that he also said is that if you don't get to this highest place, this highest archetype, then you will continue to come back and do it. Now, he's talking about reincarnation, and I'm not going to talk about reincarnation here. The way I see it is I think of God as like the ocean for me. To understand this idea of learning to trust, God is like the ocean, and I am a glass. And I take this glass, and I dip it into the ocean. And I say, okay, what do I have here? And the answer is, I have a glass of God. Now, it's not as big, it's not as strong, it's not as all-knowing, it's not as all-powerful, but it is still God. And just like a wave on the ocean is what the ocean is doing, you are what God is doing. And until you know this, you will never have the trust I'm talking about. You are what God is doing. And if you take a drop of water out of that ocean and you separate it out and you put it over here, you will find that it is weak, that it will collapse, that it has no power, that it can't do anything, because it is separated from its source. And the same is true of us. When we separate ourselves from our source, from the divinity that is in all things, we take and make ourselves powerless, impotent, unable to do the divine things that we can do when we are united, both as united with God, or with soul, or spirit, whatever you want to call it, united with each other. You see, it's that separation. It's always that separation. So it's almost like learning to trust in yourself involves trusting in the fact that you have a divinity. And this divinity is evident on the basis of the idea that God is everywhere. And if this intelligence is everywhere, you have to trust that it's in you. And there's no mistakes here. And while you may not always honor everything that you do and that others do, you can see that your essence, your basic essence of what it is that created you in the first place, is that divine organizing intelligence that can never die. You've got to know that. You've got to trust in that.
Just as the state of your life is a reflection of your state of mind, so too is the state of the world a reflection of our collective state of mind. Understanding this leads to knowing that we are capable of creating a world of real magic in the same way that I have been encouraging you to create real magic in your own individual life. The universe we live in works in exactly the same way as the universe that is within us. In order to create a world of real magic, it is necessary to know within that this is your job to accomplish. You cannot resign in anguish if others refuse to see the light. Know that you can radiate outwardly all of the messages in this tape and create the kind of real magical world that you envision. One of your biggest challenges may be in refusing to sit in judgment of those things which you perceive to be wrong or imperfect. The perceived inequities in the world are truly part of the perfection of the universe, but so is your desire to end them. If you stand way back in your mind, you will note that a revolution of spiritual dimensions is taking place right now. The Berlin Wall was built to last 1,000 years, yet today it is nothing more than a relic of an ancient non-spiritual past. That shrine of tyranny is but one of many that are toppling faster than we can update the history books. There is a new collective consciousness in the minds of people, and a new spiritual awareness is spreading throughout humanity. Nothing can stop it, for nothing is more powerful than an idea whose time has come. Communism, which insists upon atheism from its subjects, has been declared an international failure. Rulers can remove the outer places of worship, but the inner place, that invisible corner of freedom that is ever present in each of us, cannot be legislated. In China, where more than 1 billion souls are temporarily residing, 1 million of those souls face tanks to demonstrate their desire for freedom. And while the messengers can temporarily be imprisoned, the message cannot be halted. These changes are all taking place in the minds of individuals and spreading to other individuals to form a collective consciousness. Once the ideas become present in a large enough number of us, they become our reality. This number is called a critical mass. The force cannot be stopped. Some will try, but they will be swept away by the power of an idea whose time has come. The changes in the world are not restricted to political realignments and new nuclear policies. A new spiritual consciousness toward our environment has manifested itself into action as well. The idea that we should treat the earth with sacred reverence is being translated into physical realities. You are seeing the fruits of these thoughts blooming everywhere. All of the changes that you see taking place around you, which reflect a growing concern for the individual, for a peaceful, safe, harmonious world, are part of a glorious revolution that is taking place first and most importantly in our thoughts. You are a part of that process. Whatever thoughts you have can and will be spread to those around you. You influence the physical world with your thoughts. Of that you should be most convinced, having listened to this tape. If this revolution, this new way of being, is to take hold and overcome all of the remaining non-spirituality that infects the world, it will have to reach a critical mass in all areas of our existence. The most important question to be asking yourself as you look to find your own place in this spiritual revolution is, how do I see the world I live in? If you want, you can deny the spiritual revolution I have described, and instead see a world that is slowly but surely deteriorating into a non-spiritual morass. That will be your experience of the world you live in. Yet those who see the light of the world view the dark spots as merely potential light. Where is your place in the spiritual revolution? You are here on purpose to help make these changes manifest more profoundly and permanently into the consciousness of all of mankind. Your place in this revolution will solidify if you fill yourself with love. You must be able to radiate outward all that you are gaining in your spiritual consciousness. You have the power to do just that if you make that choice. As you do this on your own personal and local level, you will find yourself expanding and reaching more and more people. That is precisely what has been happening with all of the spiritual revolution changes that you see around you. You are truly the world, and your thoughts do make all the difference in this world. Have reverence for your mind. Treat your invisible inner reality with sacred, blissful appreciation. In all that I have said about creating real magic, nothing is more important than your coming into contact with the higher part of yourself. At first, you will very likely reject this notion of yourself as a miracle worker in the worldwide realm of real magic. Increasingly, however, people are believing in their own divinity and trusting in the divine wisdom that created them. They are helping to create the spiritual revolution that is now occurring. You, one person with a vision, are like a pebble in a stream, moving ever outward to infinity, impacting on all who come into contact with that ripple, which creates the spiritual world I believe in so strongly. You make all the difference in the world. Your presence here is a divine necessity, perfect and purposeful. This is your miracle-making in action. By aligning yourself with your spiritual side first rather than secondarily, you will radiate out that peace that is within. You will not be dissuaded from your mission just because others are not with you. You will stay focused on what you are for in all areas of your life. The bad news, the emphasis in the media on tragedy and pessimism will not capture your attention. You will note these as areas for improvement, but your inner divine self will be noting also how many acts of healing, kindness, and friendliness outnumber those of suffering. It truly thrills me that I have been able to create this work on real magic from within my mind. It has been a magical journey for me. I shiver inside with the awareness that it can make a difference in your life and in the entire physical world we are all immersed in. My closing quotation is from the ancient writer Philo. Households, cities, countries, and nations have enjoyed great happiness when a single individual has taken heed of the good and beautiful. Such people do not only liberate themselves, they fill those they meet with a free mind. You are that single individual, becoming a spiritual being and taking heed of the good and the beautiful. You will indeed fill yourself and those around you with a new freedom in their minds. the freedom to create real magic. God bless you.
Most college majors, when you study, there's a very high percentage of people who major in something in college end up doing something completely different. I'm one of them. It's really about allowing. That's how Abraham puts it. It's just about allowing. It's just having a knowing. A knowing means there's a banishment of all doubt. One of the keys to higher awareness, banishing the doubt. Just letting go of that and just allowing it to flow, that there's an opportunity. I was telling my daughter, the one I spoke about earlier, who's had addiction issues and so on, who's trying to just get herself back after this program and get a job. And she said, it's just so hard to get a job. I said, if you just look around, I said, just look around at, within a mile of where you are. And the next day she called me back and she said, Dad, she said, I got a job. I said, what are you doing? She said, I'm working at a motel. I said, what are you doing in the motel? She said, whatever it is that they want me to. I just walked in there and said, you know what? I just went through this program, and I would just like to do something, like anything at all that I can do. And all of a sudden, she's carrying around keys. This is her second day on the job, and she's only getting paid a minimum wage. It doesn't make any difference what she's being paid. The idea is that there are opportunities in every single moment of our life, but if you're filling your mind with it can't happen, it's not for me, this is a tough economy, things are going bad. If this is the way that you think, it's like, what is the slogan that I'm probably best known for? When you change the way you look at things, the things you look at change. It's a quantum truth. You just change the way you look at it all and say, you walk into a McDonald's and you're working at the French fry machine, and the person that I'm talking about being is thinking, how am I going to own this place? I got to learn French fries first, and then I got to learn how to grill the hamburger, and then I got to learn it all. So I'll just learn all of that, and then I'm going to figure out a way to own this place. And this is how they're thinking. Their mind is constructed that way, instead of looking at the things as wrong, and I can't do it, and it's not possible, and I don't have any opportunities. There are opportunities in every moment. I could go for 2 hours and tell you how the very first book how Your Erroneous Zones got published. In 2 minutes, I can tell you that I was given an appointment I took the manuscript that I had written in 1974, that I told you about earlier, and took it to my agent, Artie Pine, had arranged for me to have a meeting with a man named Paul Fargus at T.Y. Kroll Company in New York City. And I went there, and Paul was so depressed and so upset, and he was just broken down. And I was a therapist. I had a practice there, and I said, I was there to have him see if he would be willing to publish my book. So it was supposed to be about me. And this man was, you could just see, and I forgot about the manuscript, and I spent 3 hours counseling him and talking to him and telling him, because the night before his wife had said she wanted a divorce, and they had 2 children, and he was just so broken up he just didn't know if he could even make it. And we talked for a long time. He became one of my best friends, and I talked to him and helped him through that whole process. And my agent called me after the meeting. He said, so how did it go? How was your meeting? Are we going to get this book published? You think they'll publish it? And I said, forgot to talk about the book. Never mentioned it. He was so angry at me. It was the only time he was really angry at me. He said, do you know what it took for me to get this appointment for you? You're a nobody. Nobody even knows who you are. And you're not talking about the book. You've just blown the biggest opportunity you ever had. And that same evening, Paul called Artie and told him, I don't care what his book's about, I want to publish his book. It's a true story, true story. So it's like, when you forget about yourself, I mean, what's the lesson in that? When you let go of what's in it for me, and the mantra of the ego is, what's in it for me? How much more can I get? What about me? How about me? I want some more. The mantra of the higher self is, how may I serve? What may I do for you? And when you do that, everything shows up for you. That's when you follow your excitement. And when your excitement, what did I say yesterday? When you follow your excitement, you will be supported and it will be effortless. Because you are now aligned with God. That's what God is, your excitement. What excites you? And what excited me in that moment, back in 1975, when I had that meeting with Paul, what excited me was what excited me every day when I had my practice and my patients would come in and I would talk to them, is helping somebody to get over what seems like a trauma that is just irresolvable.
The stewardess was standing there and she said, "Oh, no. Oh, no." She knew who I was. I had been talking to her. She said, this is what I dread. I said, "What's the matter?" She said, "There's 176 people on this plane. Every one of them is going to say something nasty to me when they get off the plane. They're going to blame me, they're going to blame the airline, and they're going to..." I said, "But you don't have to let that in." She said, "What are you talking about?" I said, "Well, you've got 2 packages, 2 suits that are protecting you from anybody coming to you with that disharmony." She said, "What do you mean?" I said, "Well, you got your uniform." I said, "That's one package, and that's over the other package, which is your body, and then both of those are protecting or covering who you really are, which is how you choose to process all of this and how you choose to think and who you really are." I said, each person that comes up by you and says something negative or nasty, you can just let that only be a message to your uniform, to your package. That's not me, and you can remind yourself, they're not talking to me. They can't get to me with that stuff. They can't have that. I don't let anybody come to me unless they come with love or harmony to who I really am. So you can just say, "Well, I'm very sorry," and have a good... And it's like, and you say, "Well, they didn't get to me, and they didn't get to me. They're not reaching me with that." And sure enough, she stood there and she watched as 176 people got off, and I'd say 150 of them said something nasty to her on the way out. And each time she just sort of smiled and said, "Yes, well, it'll be 2 hours." And she gave them instructions on where to go. And when it was all done, she sat down next to me. She said, "That was fantastic. It's the first time that we've ever had a circumstance like this where I didn't let it bother me." I said, "You don't have to let that stuff into your life." And it's just like in the meditation in the field. When those thoughts start impinging on the field, the pastel that you have created, you don't have to let them in. They bounce. I do it all the time. When I'm driving, and if anybody gives me... I don't take any of that inside. I just say, "Oh, that's them, and that's how they're reacting to my form." Having a quiet mind, in a practical sense, is really understanding that what I'm talking about is not just for discussion. It's for application. If you're the kind of person who has your mind filled with 10 different things that you have to do, and that is producing anxiety, stress, ulcers, colds, backaches, headaches, cramps, runny noses, all of the kinds of physical reactions and manifestations of that kind of thinking, then you have to look at how can you just get a blank mind, or how can you get a quiet mind? How can you just understand that, supposing you're thinking about, you got to get to work, you've got this report you got to get out, you got to get your taxes done, you got to stop and get some diapers on the way home, now the kids need to have bananas, and they've got dance lessons I've got to get them to, an endless catalog of activities. By using your mind to do that, and to occupy it all the time, none of that is going to get done. See, all of that is going to get done. Regardless, if you're the kind of person who does those things, it's going to get done. The question is, how do you use your present moments? See, anytime you use up your present moment, or any time that you are thinking anxious thoughts, you're denying the present. You're using up the present moment. Instead of using it up in a productive, peaceful, serene, calm way, you are somehow believing that you can't get through this day or this moment any other way, that if I don't think about it and worry about it and be anxious about it. But the fact is, it's going to get done. Your taxes are going to get done. You're not going to jail. You're not the kind of person who's going to opt to just simply not do your taxes. You're going to get the diapers. You're going to get the report done. All of that you're going to get done. Otherwise, you wouldn't be in the position that you're in. You would be doing something else, all right? So if you know that it's going to get done, the question is, what's the most efficient and effective and peaceful way to get things done? I use the analogy often of when you're in a hurry, like when your body is in a hurry. That's when you're least effective. And that's when you always drop something. You'll drop the keys, and then you'll start sweating. And then when you start sweating, you find yourself getting more upset. You'll forget something. And you'll walk out the door, and you'll slam the door, and you left the key on the inside. Now you don't have a key. I've talked about when you take a shower. If you rush through a shower because you only have 5 minutes to take a shower, and you finish and you take your shower and then you dry yourself off, you didn't need to take a shower because you're already dirty again. I mean, you're already sweating. You can take the same 5 minutes and take a shower if that's all you have. And you can do it peacefully. The same 5 minutes. You can push all of the other stuff out, and you can just relax. And if you've got 3 minutes, instead of rushing through it, you can just let the water pour. You can experience the water. You can wash your body. You can dry it all off. And when you finish, you're not sweating. And you had the same amount of time. The nervousness and all of that comes from the way that you decide to process. Now, in the physical world, you understand that if you hurry and rush and are filled with 1,000 different activities, that you have decreased your efficiency. Why isn't the same thing true in the mental world, in your mind? If you are filling your mind with all of the things that you have to do, and you're worried about all of those things and get yourself all consumed with them, then you're still going to be less efficient, less effective, and you're still going to be cluttered. At a moment like that, you put on a tape. If you're going to drive, you got to drive. You can't get the bananas and the diapers and the report done and the IRS taken care of in the car on the freeway. You can't do that then. You're driving. So why not be here now, as Ram Dass says? Be here now. Here's some music. Put on a tape. Meditate right there. Don't close your eyes. But just like push it all out. All of that's going to get handled. But meantime, I'm going to enjoy this. My ride from my home to my office is 17 miles. I love those 17 miles. There's a million things to see in those 17 miles. I cannot write my books or get my speeches. I can't do any of that in that time. But I can enjoy all of that. I can be there with it. I can open the windows and I can let the wind blow on me and I can experience that and enjoy all of that. And when I get to where I'm going, if I've got to get the report done, I'm now prepared to do it. I'm not working on the report thinking about my taxes or getting the diapers or getting the bananas or whatever it may be. I'm here now in the moment. That's what meditating teaches you. Being here now in the moment. Quiet, joyful, peaceful. When you're there and you get your mind trained to do that, that isn't just like something you do for 15 minutes a day just to give you something to do for that 15 minutes. That carries over into everything that you do.
The first is that force always creates a counterforce. Force creates a counterforce, whereas power is always creates grace. Grace and power, over and over again, he reports the research, that power is something that will bring grace, that will bring God, will bring consciousness to the presence of it, whereas force always creates a counterforce. So that when you have a force, that is, if you react with shame, if you try to make your children feel ashamed, what are they going to do back? They resent, and what are they going to try to do to you? Some way of making you feel ashamed as well. It happens every time. You just have to watch it. You try to shame them and watch if they don't try to shame you. You said I couldn't do that, and you have to be punished for that. But you did that. You said this right away. Shame creates more shame. You've created a lowered energy field. They're weakened, you're weakened, and it works not just with shame, but with fear, with anxiety, with anger. Every time we use any of these, a counterforce is created. The second quality is that force is always loud, aggressive, whereas power is silent. That you raise energy levels through silence. And there's very little movement required when you are empowering. Whereas when you get louder, screaming, aggressive, more outgoing, and so on. The third is that force is always moving against something. That's what force is. So whatever it is that you have, we have to move against it. We have to mobilize our forces and defeat it. Whereas power does not move at all. The fourth thing is that force is always incomplete. Therefore, it must be fed energy. You must constantly feed energy of force. You must constantly be talking to it. You must constantly be upgrading it. You must constantly be trying to make it attract more energy. It's always demanding of energy. Whereas power is total and complete, requires nothing from outside itself. Power does not demand anything out there, not any weapons. It doesn't need any arguments to win. Power is that which you are connected to silently. The fifth, force always makes demands. Whenever you are in force, and if you look at any of those emotions and energy levels below 200, you will see that there's a demand to each one of them. Whereas power has no needs whatsoever. It is at peace. The sixth is force is constantly consuming. It has insatiable appetite. It is constantly demanding more. And in the process, it consumes, and in the process of consuming, it destroys. Power is always content, makes no demands, and needs nothing to consume. 7. Force always takes energy away. It takes your energy and takes it with it. Whereas power energizes. It gives forth. It supplies and supports. And it gives life energy. When you go to God, when you go to Spirit, when you go above 200 to any of those levels, what you are doing is you are energizing those around you and sending it out. Whereas when you're in any of the ones below 200, you are taking energy away. The 8th is that force is always associated with judgment and generally makes us feel badly about ourselves. Any of those emotions, any of those thoughts have to do with judging, and ultimately when you experience those thoughts or you're in the presence of someone who is using those thoughts, you will end up feeling badly or worse for the experience. Whereas power is associated with compassion, radical humility, and always makes us feel positive about ourselves. When you encounter someone whose thoughts are above 200, after that encounter, you will feel better for having been in their presence, based upon not just what you talk about, but even the feelings that you have. Whereas when you're associated with or around people who are using the techniques below 200, you feel yourself feeling badly, worse, and depleted of energy. Number 9, force always polarizes because it demands conflict in order to survive. Force and conflict go together. Power, the energy of power above 200 will unify and make you feel more like you belong, a sense of belonging. Number 10, I just put it this way, in force, the cost is always very high because enemies are always being created. Force needs an enemy. It costs to stay in a state of force. Whereas power has no cost whatsoever. It's absolutely free. It's graceful, it's silent, it's easy, it's non-consuming, it makes no demands. The 11th, and I've always been intrigued by this, the 11th quality or characteristic of force, force always requires proof because it's literal and it's therefore arguable. Whereas power deals with intangibles, and it knows that health is better than disease. It doesn't need any proof of that. It knows that honor is better than dishonor. It knows that faith is better than doubt, and that being constructive is better than destructive. And you don't need a chi-square, and you don't need an analysis of variance, and you don't need a statistical test to be able to prove it, and you don't need to argue about it. There's an awareness that is internal, that is instinctive, that says, I don't have to go out there and show anything. It's why it's quiet. I know it is better to be honorable than it is to be dishonorable. I know it is better to be honest than to steal. I don't need proof of that. I know that it is better to be healthy than to be in a state of disease. I know that life is better than death. I know this. I don't have to prove it. I don't have to explain it. I live in a consciousness of empowerment in which I don't have to go through and look outside of myself to validate whether these things that I know instinctively and intuitively are correct. And it's something I'd like to suggest to you when I talk about you can't give away what you don't have. That whatever it is that you are giving away in the way of being offended or being an appreciator, and by the way, appreciation versus depreciation is the highest form of energy that you can have to your thoughts. In other words, every time you have a thought of depreciation, you have weakened yourself in some form. Any kind of a thought of depreciation. Whereas if you can shift a thought of depreciation into one of appreciation, even for that which you have been conditioned to believe deserves to be depreciated, if you can figure out a way to change and alter your thoughts, then you move into a higher energy. But more than moving into a stronger and a higher energy with appreciation, is that you move into a level of consciousness called synchronicity, in which you start to negotiate the presence of energy to serve as an attractor pattern. And that what I'm speaking about, solid energy as the lowest form of energy, and spiritual energy as the highest and the fastest form of energy, and that spiritual energy, the energy of love, the energy of cheerfulness, the energy of kindness, the energy of peace, when this energy is brought to the presence of the energy in which you have problems, lower energy, that these problems dissolve, they can't survive any more than darkness can survive in the face of light, then there is some kind of a gap that you have to negotiate between the world of problem energy and the world of higher energy. But what you have to look at here, when I say you can't give away what you don't have, is to ask yourself, if I can't give away what I don't have, it means that I am giving away what I do have. And because it's the only thing I can give away. I have to have it to give it away. So, and if energy is the vehicle upon which things are attracted and come into my life, then what is it that I am sending out there, because it is in giving that we receive, what is it that I'm giving? What am I sending out there? What kind of energy do I send out there? And begin to look at that as the rationale and the explanation and the reasoning behind what is showing up in your life. That it really has nothing to do with what's going on outside of you in other people and in other events and in what other people are saying or doing or circumstances of your life. As much as we like to use that as an explanation and a rationale for it, that in fact, if you can change around your thinking to ask yourself, why do I keep attracting what it is that I'm attracting into my life, and what can I do to attract something different into my life? These things that we're calling attractor energies, that possibly, just possibly, I might be able to come to a place where I recognize that everything that's going on in my life, everything, I take responsibility for. And if I continue to attract the wrong people, or scarcity instead of abundance, or illness instead of health, or unhappiness rather than happiness, or fear rather than faith. And again, I always go back to that very famous prayer of St. Francis, where there is doubt, let me bring faith. Where there is despair, hope. Where there is darkness, light. Where there is sadness, joy. Where there is hatred, love. And if I can find a way to rid myself of those, just the thoughts, that I might possibly open myself up to a new idea, a mind that is open to everything, is one in which I say that I have been responsible for attracting all of these things into my life, and now I'm going to work at it for a given period of time of attracting something different into my life. I'm going to go with new attractor patterns of energy. I'm just going to go with it. and see if I can make that shift begin to take place. And this thing that I have referred to as synchronicity is something that Jung said is something that is very real and is very powerful and is something that you can access. Which means that as you reach a faster energy yourself, you see, if everything is energy and nothing happens until something moves, and everything is moving, then you yourself are just a great big bundle of energy. You are just vibrating, and if you are a bundle of energy, if you buy this idea that your hand and your feet and your eyes and your entire body is really nothing more than a series of very, very tiny subatomic particles all moving together very fast with spaces between them, and you see that and you can get that, then you recognize that there's got to be a frequency at which you are vibrating. It's got to be vibrating at some frequency. And if you can also accept the idea that if I could move to a faster and a higher, more spiritual energy, that I will literally change the vibration at which I am vibrating, then it begins with the thoughts. It begins with how I am processing and thinking thoughts, that I can absolutely get to a place where I can start to radiate out different kinds of energy.
I have been accused over the years in the critical press of providing false hope to people. People will call, and I'll be on a talk show on the radio someplace in the world, and someone will call in who's been diagnosed with a terminal illness of some kind, and I will talk to them about not buying into the diagnosis. About why would you just listen to a group of people who have a vested interest in convincing you of this impending doom in your life, and the law that has ever allowed any miracle to ever take place in the history of humanity is still on the books. It hasn't been repealed, so that energy, whatever it is, whoever has ever healed themselves of a diagnosis of terminal illness, used the same kind of energy that is in you. And so people say, well, that's providing false hope and so on. And I remember, again, to speak about Michelangelo, I mean, these people that I selected for, or that selected me for Wisdom of the Ages, I feel, after studying their lives in depth and looking at not only what they had to say, but what they were like, I mean, I feel like you're talking about my grandfather or something when you speak about Michelangelo. And again, in Florence, when we went to Florence, I said, I'm just going to go see the statue of David. And I thought, well, I'll just look at this statue. Everybody has to see David.
Yes.
And I walked in there, and you go through this long corridor, and you see all of these slaves on either side that are coming out of the concrete that were all sculpted by Michelangelo. And then you come into this room that's all lit, and then there's this statue, this magnificent statue, and it's 18 feet high. And it is the most astounding thing I've ever seen. And I'm not a big art critic or even going to art shows and sculpture and all that. I enjoy it, but it's not something that I have a passion about.
Yes.
Well, 4 hours later, Michael, I was still standing in front of that statue. My wife and my 3 daughters were out there climbing El Duomo and buying shoes and doing all the things that you do when you're in Italy.
Right.
And they came back and they said, Dad, come on, we have to leave. And I felt like I couldn't leave that place. It was such a beautiful experience. I mean, you can see every vein in in this thing, and it's just a magnificent experience. So when they ask, there's this wonderful quote that they ask Michelangelo, how could you have created such a perfect specimen of sculpture from one piece of marble? His famous quote is that David was already in the marble. I just chipped away the excess.
Yes.
And that there's a David inside each and every one of us.
Yes.
And this idea of if you're, the greater danger is not that our hopes are too high and we fail to reach them, it's that they are too low and we do. And most people see themselves in terms, they don't see, I think you should see yourself as a saint. And I think a person ought to be envisioning themselves as capable of doing anything. I think it's possible to excel in every area of life. That is, you don't have to sort of restrict yourself to one area. I think you can enjoy going to a National Football League game in the afternoon and going to the ballet in the evening.
Yes.
When people say, well, you're a speaker, usually speakers, and you get paid a lot for speaking, so usually speakers are not good writers, or because one is introverted and supposedly and one is extroverted. And I have often thought, why can't you be a really fine writer and a great speaker as well?
Sure.
And why can't you be a great athlete and a poet as well? Why not? And most of these people like Goethe and Michelangelo and Da Vinci and Shakespeare and Pope and so many of these people, these were people who were masters at 1,000 different things. Isn't that interesting? How we, like in medicine now, I mean, now you have a specialist who specializes in the right finger,
Right, exactly. Yes.
We have hand specialists, we have foot specialists and nose specialists, and imagine going to school for years and studying only the hand.
Yes.
Whereas here was Da Vinci or Michelangelo, and they studied, they were anatomists. I mean, they studied anatomy, and were medical people. They studied the way that Michelangelo learned about, how to do sculpture was by examining cadavers. They would literally steal the cadavers and go through, and he would examine them. And it's like when you discover the greatness that's in yourself, and not restricting yourself in any way. And not enough of us can think of ourselves as being able to excel in all areas and to have high hopes about virtually everything. Because high hopes is not just a song that Frank Sinatra sang with a bunch of kids. High hopes is being able to visualize and see for yourself what it is that you'd like to be able to accomplish in your life. A lot of people are looking for the how-tos. How can I become a more spiritual person? Or how can I find my purpose? And they start with the way that they learn anything. Problem-solving logic. A plus B plus C plus D equals whatever it is, and you just go through the steps. It's not like that. When you consider that everything that you have done in your life has led you up until this moment that you have right now, and all of the things that you have assessed to be negative, all of the addictions perhaps that you've had, all of the problems you've had in your marriages, all the problems you've had with your children, all of the weight problems perhaps that you've had, all of the difficulties that have come your way, the financial concerns and the bankruptcies and all of the stuff that if you were to reach into your bag, you could pull out this whole bag full of negative stuff. You get to a point that the Buddhists call satori, S-A-T-O-R-I, satori. It means instant enlightenment. Instant enlightenment. And the Buddhists believe, by and large, that enlightenment is something that happens in instants. It happens in moments. It's like I've talked about at some of my other tapes about going through the gate. It's like on one side of the gate is the path that is strewn with thorns, all right? And there's all of the stuff that I have just described. And then there's this gate ahead of you. And then on the other side of the gate is this garden. And there's this flowers, and it's just magnificent, and there's happiness, and there's bliss, and there's fulfillment, and there's all of this wonderful stuff on the other side. But you can't get through the gate. And then comes the moment in your life when you go through the gate. You just go through. The thorns that were there don't matter anymore. The obstacles are no longer obstacles. It's just and it's like, boom, instantaneously, you are now on a different path altogether. I can tell you that for those of you who are struggling and trying to find a formula and trying to get it all into A, B, C, D, E, F, it isn't that way. First of all of the thorns and all of the obstacles that have been created in your life are there for a reason, even though that's a hard thing for us to accept. There's something to be learned from each one of those. And so instead of saying, how can I avoid these in the future, you reprocess your life in a different way and say, I created this for what reason? And I'm going through this because, and you fill in the blanks, or the lesson in this for me is, all right, instead of why is this happening to me and isn't this awful and so on. And then satori happens. And I mean, that was very revealing for me to read about this instant enlightenment, because every major change
that I've made in my life, I mean, they don't seem like big changes, but the changes that I've made happened in instants. I mean, just in seconds. Now, in the physical world of changes that I have made, I can remember when I first decided that I was going to start running and exercising and get myself in shape instead of being overweight and out of shape like I had been. In an instant. And it was a doctor at a hospital where I wasn't a patient. I was working there. I was training the staff in group therapy at North Shore Hospital on Long Island. And this doctor said one thing to me. He said, if you continue on the path that you're on, you're going to be a candidate for a heart attack in 5 years. He wasn't trying to be helpful to me. He wasn't anything. He just was making a statement. And that evening, I went out and I ran for the first time as an adult. And it's now almost 15 years later, and I haven't missed a day of running in 15 years. It was just like an instant kind of thing, and then it was like carrying through on that. And I mean, that really flies in the face of a lot of the stuff that we hear all the time about you have to have a goal, and you have to have a plan, and you have to get it all figured out, and you have to work step by step by step. I really think that enlightenment, or discovering this inner source of strength, is something that just happens in an instant whenever you're ready. So whoever you are, I mean, if you're smoking, if you're drinking excessively, if you've got addictive habits in your eating habits and so on, if you are behaving in ways with your children or with your wife or coworkers or whatever, and you think that it's just hopeless and that you can't change and that it's just too difficult to process and so on, I'm really saying to you that in an instant you can decide to radically alter your life. And it isn't like even a decision-making process. You're now ready. The same Buddhists say that when the student is ready, the teacher will appear.
I tell people, supposing you went to sleep and you had a dream, and in your dream you had, all these different characters, and you had all of this money, and you had everything that you wanted in your dream. And then you woke up, and then you look back at your dream, and you became attached to the stuff that you had in your dream. And you said, wait a minute, I want that. There was gold in there. There was silver. There was all of these friends. I had a Ferrari there. I mean, all of this. I got to have that. Somebody would come away and cart you off and put you in a rubber room and say, that was a dream. You can't be attached to that. That's just a thought that you have. That's the way you got to view life. Instead of it being an 8-hour dream, it's an 80-year dream or a 90-year dream. And at the end of the dream, you don't want to be looking back at all of the stuff that you wish you could still have because you can't have it. You don't get any of that. So you try to detach yourself now while you're here, while you're alive, from the need to have that stuff. Instead, you just let it sort of all flow. As absurd as it would be for you to be attached to the stuff that you had in your dream, it's that absurd for you to be attached to the stuff that you're having in this dream. You have to die while you're alive. Now, that's a very hard concept for people to get. But you have to experience your own death while you're alive. Let me tell you a story. It's a wonderful story. It's an old, ancient story. I'll paraphrase it. There was a hunter who lived in India, and he would go to Africa every 2 years, and he would bring back animals and prizes and things like that. Well, one year he took off and he went to the jungle, and he discovered this large enclave inside the jungle. And it was filled with beautiful parrots, beautiful birds, multicolored, and they all talked. And he couldn't get over it. And he put a net out over one of the trees, and he captured one of the parrots. And he put the parrot in a cage. And he brought the parrot back to be with him in India as his pet. And he fed the parrot sunflower seeds, and he fed him rice, and he took wonderful care of him. He was very good. Kept him in the cage. 2 years went by, and he talked to the parrot every day. And he said to the parrot, I'm now going back to Africa. Is there anything you would like me to say to your friends back there in the jungle when I'm back there? The parrot said, yes. Tell them that I'm very happy in my cage. Tell them that I am joyful and that I love being in my cage here with you. Just tell them that. The hunter went back to Africa. He went back to the place in the jungle where he had been 2 years before. And he told the story. He said, "Your friend that I took back has a message for you. And the message is that he is happy in his cage, that he is joyful with me, and that he has no regrets." At the instant of hearing that, a bird on one of the branches keeled over and dropped dead. Dropped dead, stiff. The hunter assumed that he was just filled with sorrow at hearing of what had happened to his friend. So he went back to India, and he told his parrot what had happened. He said, "I went back and I did just as you said. And I told them all out there, and at the moment that I told it, apparently one of the parrots was so upset that he'd missed you so much that he just dropped dead. And at the instant that that happened, the parrot in the cage keeled over dead. His legs went straight up in the air, and he went stiff. The hunter was beside himself. He couldn't figure out how could this happen. And he took the dead parrot out of the cage, opened it up, and threw it out on the woodpile. The instant that the parrot landed on the woodpile, he flew up to the branch. And the hunter said, "You tricked me. What is this? I thought you were dead." And the parrot said, "My friend was sending me a message. He told me, by his actions, that in order for you to escape from your cage, you must die while you're alive." Okay, now that's an old story. That's an ancient story that's been told over the years. What does it mean? I mean, don't you see that this is a cage? That the whole planet is a cage? If you can just stand back far enough and see that we're still restricted by the limitations placed on us as human beings. We're stuck here, or maybe in our homes, or in wherever we are. We're all in cages. And even though we have more room to manipulate, we may even have a whole planet, we're still sort of in cages. Now, how do you escape from the cage that you're in? You have to die while you're alive. You have to literally experience your own death. All of us have to. All of us are going to die. So why not experience it in advance? And see yourself out of your body, gone, but able to look back at what's going on now. Just like the dream, where you have the dream and you have everything you want, but you're able to look back at it. As you do that, you begin to see the folly, the absurdity of hanging on to anything, of being attached to anything, of needing anything, of telling yourself that I can't be happy if, from the perspective of having died, but being able to look back on it just like the dream. As soon as you can do that, as soon as you can experience yourself formless, dimensionless, form and all of the attendant things that you hang on to become irrelevant. They're not necessary any longer. You have a whole new way of living, a new way of being.